Welcome to the LivBtr podcast. I'm Erica Spiegelman, addiction and wellness specialist and author, and along with me, I have my co-host, Jay Siano, a New York-based serial entrepreneur, business scaling expert, and wellness aficionado. We are here to inspire, encourage growth, and most importantly, to live better. Welcome to the LivBtr podcast. Our guest today is Craig Siegel. He is a value-based and high-energy global keynote speaker and rising thought leader. He was featured in Entrepreneur and endorsed by some of the world's most well-known celebrities, entertainers, athletes, and entrepreneurs. Craig's unique combination of energy, motivation, and inspiration, charisma, and business success has led him to a meteoric rise of the Cultivate Lasting Symphony, otherwise known as CLS, a contagious, never-before-seen explosion that has impacted millions of lives worldwide. We can't wait to talk to Craig.
On today's podcast, we have my very dear friend, Craig Siegel. Craig, welcome to the LivBtr podcast. Craig, for our listeners, will you give a little background on yourself? Tell them the amazing things that you're doing.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. This is going to be such a treat. Every time we get together, we create magic. And I love what you guys are doing, combining both of your passions and your alignments and bring it in one spot. I think it's dynamic and I'm excited and the world's a better place for it. So a little bit of background on me. I basically had two lives. One is before my reinvention and then one is ever since. Make a long story short, I spent about 13 years on Wall Street. At that season of my life, I was successful, or what I considered to be successful back then. I was obviously a little bit more unenlightened and immature. I was making money. But I didn't have much purpose. And a few years back, I found myself in a little bit of a dark season. I had just got out of a toxic relationship. My best friend, my pops, my dad had got diagnosed with cancer. And like I said, even though I was making money, wasn't exactly putting a dent in the universe. And full disclosure, I was probably drinking more than I'd like to admit, kind of trying to escape my current reality at that time.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. I think we've all been there to an extent. And the good news is for the audience listening, pain is the portal, and I'll explain. And so when I got to this place, I was looking to climb out of it. And I'm not sure if I found running or running found me. Talk about divine intervention. But I started running a bunch of marathons. Wasn't looking to become a professional or anything like that. I was looking to find myself, put myself in an arena. And I started to get confidence. I started to get a little bit closer. And then fast forward the pandemic. Bang. Talk about a global awakening. Looked around and I saw a lot of Netflix, specifically that Tiger show, and a lot of day drinking. I'm like, that's not going to be me. And now looking back, I mean, I guess it's easier now connecting dots looking backwards, but that was a historic opportunity for those who seized it. And very humbly, I was one who seized it. And I took that second to reassess. And as it turns out, I was not happy up until that point. And so I just said, what are my passions to myself? And I had a spiritual moment. I started receiving downloads. I was available finally. And there it was. I'm obsessed with personal development. Love it. I combined that with my gift to communicate effectively. And I married those two. Very next day in a run, it came to me. Cultivate Lasting Symphony, my brand, or CLS, a play of my initials. Why the word symphony? I'm a strange cat. Always liked that word. Started putting out content. And I had that moment. It was like, can I really do this? Just like everyone does before something epic and scary. And I said this to myself, there's no guarantee that this will work out, but the cost of inaction is way too high. And I actually made it very real, where I associated death with choosing to go back and be miserable after lockdown. Took my shot, and over the last 2.5 years, the brand's exploded. One of the top entrepreneurial podcasts on the planet, speaking all over the world. Live events, just got a record first-time book deal, community coaching, all the things. Sold the business on Wall Street. This is it for me in some capacity, and we're just getting warmed up. And it wasn't only a career reinvention, it was really a life. Also got engaged. So that's how we got to where we are right now.
Wow. Congratulations on everything. It's incredible. It's so funny. Running too saved my life in many ways after I
Really?
changed my life. Oh, yeah. That was it. It was like a mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional gift. And it helped me in terms of my self-care with all four things, and the layers of my life at the time. It filled all of it, it really did. So I love to hear that from other people.
I love that you said that. The way you described it real quick, because when you start running, you create better habits, right? You start like maybe going to bed a little bit early, waking up later, maybe cut down on the booze, eating better. So you become a better person on that journey.
Right. And there's like more positive self-regard. You're proud of yourself. You see your strength. You see your endurance. You see what you're capable of. And I think that even fed into my moment of gratitude every day was after my run at the last block. I would go over, really dropping deep of what I was grateful for, because I felt so like alive in that moment. And then endorphins were going, and I was just, able to kind of tap into the blessings and how far I've come. And it was also another thing that was like tacked on to that action of just getting out and fresh air and moving. It was great. It was great.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, that whole thing resonates with me so much. I personally am not a runner, but if I do not do some sort of workout or get my sweat in, which I, by the way, have not today based on the travel circumstances of the day, I'm off and everything is basically in sync. And the minute that I don't get that morning workout in, it kind of sets the tone for the day. Win the morning, win the day. I believe that so much. And it's funny though, because before I was as fit as I am today and as disciplined as I am today, I would look at other people, a runner on the street, and be like, I wish I could be more like that. And I actually started to implement different things from different people that I admired to very much get where I am today. And Craig, I love the impact that you're having in such a relatively short amount of time on so many lives is really inspiring for me, and it's awesome to know you.
Thank you so much.
I just want to ask you, like you talk, in your work you talk about limiting beliefs, from what I understand, and I feel like I talk about this daily with people in my own private practice, and even I was just talking about with my husband of just we like attune to these beliefs about ourselves based on our narratives and what we think we are, versus being like, if I feel like I'm a procrastinator, or I feel like I am, someone who's not a good speaker or not a good communicator, we tell ourselves these stories. That's who I am. And then we start identifying with this. And then we don't give ourselves the chance to grow, the chance to actually find out, can I communicate better? Can I believe other things about myself? So I'm just curious, when you decided, did you always feel like you had something to give others? And two, how do you get over the limiting beliefs so that you can actually take action and change your life?
Yeah, it's interesting because as Jay knows, we just handed the manuscript for our big book deal with Wiley, and throughout that process of writing the book, I really did a deep dive on things that I haven't really thought about in decades. And one of them was like, who am I? Like, who was I like back in the day? And the truth of the matter is I was a somewhat popular kid growing up, but I never really felt at home. Like I was people pleasing, and I was trying to be something I'm not. Being straight up with you guys and vulnerable, but I did always feel called, like that there was something else out there, like a bigger impact or something bigger for me. But I was never able to put it together. But when I got to Wall Street, I simultaneously started doing the personal development stuff, studying NLP and a lot, even the concept that Jay was just talking about, like modeling attributes from people that you hold in high regard and gravitating towards them and so forth. So I always felt like there was something more. I just was never able to put it together. And that ties to the other part of the question you asked in regards to limiting beliefs and stories. Here's the truth. For years, I was replaying this belief, this story, this movie, if you will, inside my head that this was it for me. Like I'm a Wall Street guy and never really be that happy. And if I saw people happy, like within relationships, like on social media, I was like, right, okay, they're not really that happy. And here's the best one. When someone was like, find what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, I'd be like, right, okay. It'll always be a JOB, because I was so invested in this limiting belief story and this movie that was replaying. And then when the pandemic or the lockdown happened, I took a second and realized that I actually have a choice on which story I want to buy into. And it occurred to me that I could choose a different story. And so then I started thinking, well, what do I love? And could I do that? And well, then the limiting beliefs creeped in again. Well, you don't have experience. Tony Robbins, Emily, they've been doing this for years. I'm like, okay, but I love this stuff. I've been successful at things that I don't even like at. I'm resourceful. I'm hardworking. I'm willing to give this a shot. And then I started to cultivate confidence, and I tapped into a new belief. Thing is most of the limiting beliefs that people have, if not almost all of them, we weren't born with, right? Like if you look at like a little kid, like they're so happy and joyful because they haven't really been beaten down by life yet. And if I ask you this, if I ask your listeners, like, what do you think sees more clearly, like your eyes or an iPhone camera? And I would have to say probably the iPhone camera. Why? Because the iPhone camera hasn't been distorted yet. They haven't had the opportunity to create like a matrix or a limiting beliefs or change our frame yet. And throughout life, we start to cultivate, whether it's our parents, our community, our neighborhood, the news, whatever, we start to buy into things that may or may not be true. And so in the pandemic, I realized that that was just that. I had been buying into these false illusions, these limiting beliefs that aren't real. And then I chose different beliefs and I started feeding those positive, empowering thoughts. And then I realized, why not me, right? And the rest is history. So the bottom line is, for anyone that's struggling right now with limiting beliefs or feel like they're unworthy or they can't do anything, they're not real. They're just beliefs that you decided to buy into, and you can choose a different belief.
How
you have such an impressive track. Oh, go ahead, Erica.
No. I was just saying, just before you ask a question, I just want to quickly, if you could give one tip of was it writing down, kind of the new beliefs that you wanted to subscribe to? Was it just maybe one tool, one tip?
Well, yeah, first of all, what you just said is great, right? But I think it almost like a computer program, right? Like if there's a virus on a computer, like obviously you want to uninstall that, right? But now you want to activate something that's more enriching and empowering. So now you reinstall a program that can actually help you or encourage you, right? So it's literally that. Like I would think of some of the beliefs that were holding me back from wanting to get ahead. Even like when I started running, right? Like I didn't do CLS yet, but it was kind of similar. It's like, I can't run a marathon. I always lifted weights. I never did cardio. I'm like, okay, that's one belief. Here's another. I can start to learn how to train. I could start to put in the miles. I can get faster. I could work on my nutrition. I could become more experienced. Then I signed up for a marathon and I conquered it and so forth. So I think awareness is huge. You really nailed it. You have to be aware of the limiting beliefs, because if you can't see it, how can you change it? So you have to acknowledge that they exist. Doesn't mean you have to approve of them, but acknowledge them, and then you can uninstall and reinstall.
So you've built a very sizable community at this point, and you've had amazing guests on your podcast. What would you say are the most common traits of these very high functioning people that you have had on your podcast? What do you think they share in common?
What a fantastic question, brother. And I think there's obviously a couple similarities, but one that sticks out is that the greats in all the fields that I've interviewed and collaborated and become really good friends with is they reverted back to their standards as opposed to their feelings. For example, let's say you set your alarm clock today for tomorrow morning at 4 a.m. because you decided that you were committed to waking up, getting an edge, working on a passion project, or maybe getting a workout in before everyone else woke up. But then tomorrow, when your alarm goes off, the other voice comes in, you're like, oh, it's okay, just snooze a little bit, or you're tired. You don't have to do that. I think amateurs, respectfully, will cave to their feelings, but the jugs, they like to call the juggernauts, or the professionals, they say, I'm a little tired, but I set a standard, right? So it's actually a non-negotiable. So even though I'm a little tired, I'm going to power through and revert back to my standards. Kind of like when you ask like a Navy SEAL or someone like that, like what do they do in battle? Like they revert back to their training, right? So standards over feelings is a big one that I see.
Love that.
Yeah. I wanted to just ask you too, Craig, about your book that's coming out a little bit. Can you tell everybody about it and how the idea came to be and what inspired you?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. The truth of the matter is when I started CLS, like I looked at it as like a 10-lane highway, right? Like each lane would be something else: speaking, coaching, the community, the podcast. And the book was on there, but I wasn't in a rush, right? Like I always wanted to do everything really big. So when it came for the book, I didn't, no disrespect for anyone that did this, I chose a different route. I didn't want to self-publish it. I wanted to be with a major publishing house and have it almost like a movie having like a studio behind it, right? So I had it on the whiteboard. It was on the vision board, but then I kind of married the process and divorced from the outcome. And I was putting in the reps and doing the work and building the brand and getting momentum. And then when the time was right, probably last summer or maybe last winter, Wiley, the book that had the publisher that had a huge success with Ed Milet's book, looking for the next Ed Milet, they actually approached us. And from what I understand, that never happens. Even like the celebrities, like they'll have a script and they'll get a lit agent and they'll pitch it different houses. They actually came to us. Of course, I negotiated a better advance and so forth, but it was something I always wanted to do. But the timing was right when they came to us. In regards to the book itself, it's called The Reinvention Formula. You guys know me, so part of the core message that CLS is about is reinvention, because I like to say, even if you didn't like me, hard to believe, I know, one thing you couldn't deny is that I'm an expert in reinvention, right? Because even if I'm not your cup of tea, you can't deny that I had one life and then I reinvented myself and had a ton of success. So I know a thing or two about reinvention. So this book is cool because I've read a lot of the self-help books from a lot of our mutual friends and people in the space. And I didn't want this book to just be a book of principles, like, oh, do this, I wanted it to be a little bit of a hybrid. So it's a bit about my story. And again, I've been sharpening the axe for 15 years. I have journals on journals, whiteboards. This was all before I put it together to make it a career. So I talk about all the things I learned from NLP, law of attraction, Kabbalah, a lot of the setbacks from Wall Street and from running and from injuries and life adversity and so forth, and the lessons that I applied and extracted so I can make them applicable for the audience. So basically everything that's happened for me, and then all the tools that I use to actually reinvent myself and launch a personal brand.
It's amazing. Yeah. What is yeah, I'm just curious what has been most surprising about building a brand, building a company, connecting with new people, having the podcast. Like, what have you personally, like, I feel like, we're all always evolving in life. I feel like every chapter of my life recently, I feel like a little evolution each chapter. But for you, like, what has surprised you about stepping into this and then getting that set up 2 years ago and then now today? Like, how much have you grown from then even till today?
Yeah, so I'm not the same cat I was 3 weeks ago. Like I'm growing so much right now at such a rapid pace. It's exciting. But it's also funny because like I'll look at content that I put out 2 months ago, or an episode, if I hear it that I filmed with someone 2 months ago, and it already feels outdated to me. And I think that's because I'm in such a trajectory of growth. When I say growth, I don't mean like the brand and all that, although that's great, but just me personally, like I'm always evolving. I'm looking to improve and get better. But the one thing that sticks out to me that I found interesting is that when I started CLS, although there was no guarantee that it was going to work, I made one guarantee to myself, that for the first time in my life, I would show up to the world, real, raw, authentic, vulnerable, transparent, all the strangeness, all the weirdness. I would be me for the first time ever. And it might not catch, but it might. But life will act as a true, authentic filter. And the wrong people will kind of gravitate away, and the right people will gravitate towards me. And if, God forbid, CLS didn't work out, and I was pretty confident it would because I never felt so aligned, but God forbid it didn't, I could live with the fact that I gave it everything I got, and it was actually me, and not a people pleaser, really me. And as it turns out, not only did it work, but the more vulnerable, transparent, strange, and weird that I am, and Jay can see this sometimes, the more the audience and the community actually connect and resonate with me. And so what I learned is that vulnerability is a superpower. I also think it's sexy. And it's funny because like, if you look at like movie characters or like whomever, a book character, like everybody loves a comeback, right? Or you like someone that's been through it because it's like, oh, if they can get through it, so can I, and stuff like that. So it kind of makes sense. But bottom line is the more vulnerable and transparent I am, the more people connect. And I think that's a good lesson for anybody, anyone in your listeners, especially if you're looking to explode a personal brand.
As you're continuing to grow and evolve as a human, how is that affecting old friendships, relationships, personal, professional? Eric and I go back to college. We were just together in LA a few days ago with a bunch of people we haven't seen in many, many years. And it's interesting because similarly to exactly what you described, Craig, I am unrecognizable from who I was even a year ago, right? So how does that evolve for you as you continue to grow in such a major way in a, again, relatively short period of time?
Yeah, the reality is, brother, is that I just don't have much in common with people from my pre-CLS life. Just want to be clear, does not mean that I'm better or anything like that. I'm spreading my wings and I'm growing at such a pace where I just don't have much in common with the old Craig. And the old Craig used to gravitate towards a different type of person, right? So like now, like even me and you, Jay, like when we meet for coffee, we hang out privately, like we're talking about growth, personal development, cool things. It's like, that's my dinner conversations these days. And I'm really big on positivity, and not like, I actually consider myself delusionally optimistic, but I don't mean like toxic positivity, but like I'm just not available for negativity or what can go wrong. I just make the choice to be available for like what can go right and cool stuff and growth and all that. It doesn't mean that like, look, if I'm going to hang out or meet up with some people from my past, doesn't mean I'm cutting everyone off, right? I have to make a mental note to myself, like, all right, this interaction, number one, it's probably going to be more limited than it used to be. And number two, I'm allowing myself some time to go there, and I'm probably not going to be doing much sharpening the axe. Maybe some of the glory days and stuff like that, but it'll be, there'll be a time stamp on it, and then I'll continue doing what I'm doing. But the reality is like people from my past, like sometimes the texts in between get a little bit longer, right? Like the meetings in between get a little bit longer. I just don't have as much in common. And also, I really want to be around people that are supportive, encouraging, positive, go-getters, and just good integrity all around. So to answer your question in a nutshell, it's done a lot for my previous relationships. In fact, all the people that I met from CLS on after are really my closest friends now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's really the beautiful part of what you're doing. It's so organic and natural. And I think the universe responds in the most interesting ways where it brings people that are more similar to yourself into your life, like me.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Perfect example.
Craig, I was going to, when you're talking, I'm thinking about how, a lot of the times in my work, I talk about reframing and our thought habits and the quality of our thoughts and how important that is for transformation, for living a healthier life. If not, it's everything, really our mental health is everything. But for the people you work with and kind of the work you do, how do you approach, what kind of tips do you like individually give people? Because we're all different. Like, I go about it in one way. I think we're all similar. We all believe that to be true, that it is helpful. But how do you talk to the people you work with about reframing and about their thought habits and how to kind of rewire or create new pathways around our language and the language we use? How do you approach that in your unique way?
First of all, I love a good, powerful reframe, right? All about perspective. It's funny because like two people could look at the exact same thing and have two totally different outlooks on it. So I'm big into reframes. As we always like to say, like it happened for us, not to us. What is the silver lining? Or if something happens that seems like a setback at the time, although you might not be able to identify it right now, whether you have faith or whatever the case may be, that it's actually protecting, propelling, and promoting you to something greater. In regards to your thoughts, look, it's like the seeds in the garden, right? Like, and I want to be clear, thoughts are not facts, right? So most people all day long are being fed negative thoughts because that's just backed by science. Like 90% of our thoughts are negative. And so what you have to do is first become aware of that and then have a strategy or a system to block out that interference. And there's a line, I didn't make this up so I can't take credit for it, but it's beautiful. And it was like, we don't create abundance, we create limitations. In other words, like we're actually meant to be abundant, on fire, part of the collective infinite, whatever the case may be, the quantum field. But somehow along the way, interference comes in, negative thoughts, unworthiness, and so forth. So as I like to say, there's such power in the second thought, right? So if you're feeling down or you a lot of people have morning anxiety, right away, what are the thoughts that you're allowing to take up real estate that are creating these limiting beliefs? And then literally like an intruder in your house, get the hell out and start replacing them with positive thoughts. I am worthy. I am resourceful. I am enough. I can do this, and so forth. And then those thoughts begin to build momentum. And then those actually are the seeds to creating these new beliefs, which change our habits, which ultimately change our results. So I don't know anyone that's really on fire that has a lot of negative thoughts. And just to be clear, I know this because I used to be that cat. I used to be filled with negative thoughts, so forth. Once you become aware of them, you can literally choose which thoughts you want to implement like a funnel inside your mind. And then those will create positive beliefs and so forth. Best news is if anyone listening to this feels down, or any day really that you feel down, it's just feedback essentially from the universe letting you know that right now your thoughts are a little disempowering. That's why you're in a low frequency. It's why you're vibing low. And the best part is because you have that feedback, you can now transform from reactive to proactive and do something about it. Start feeding yourself some positive thoughts. I am grateful. I do get to drop my kid off today, right? I am alive. I do have a parent, whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden you start to get that momentum. Now you have new beliefs and you literally change your whole life. Then you become a vibrational match for all the manifestation stuff out there. So I think it, again, comes down to awareness and then having a system in place to replace the negative thoughts with positive, empowering ones.
Love that. Wow. Great.
It's great. Would you agree that in addition to positive thoughts, that taking action and holding yourself accountable helps you kind of build that momentum, establish confidence? Because I think for myself, the more I challenge myself, the more that the tougher things that I'll implement, that I'll accomplish, the better I feel. And, I kind of continue that momentum. I think a lot of people talk about, the attitude and obviously being positive and affirmations and all of that great stuff. But I think you really have to couple that with massive action.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, you could talk about it all day. That's why they say the book or the movie The Secret was incomplete, right? Because you can't just sit on your couch and say, oh, I'm manifesting a Lamborghini in my garage. Like you actually have to apply the law of Goya, which is get off your ass and do something.
Love that.
And the good news is once you start to do that, like it becomes fun. It's intoxicating because then you get positive momentum. You start getting results and so forth, right? And even if something is assembling a positive morning routine, right? Like meditating, affirmations, visualization, whatever the case may be, you can't just write that down. You wake up a little bit earlier and you start to implement those. You start to do them. Then you start to feel a little bit better and you alter your frequency and so forth. So yeah, it's not enough to just think positive thoughts. You have to then superset that, if you will, with positive action.
So I've had the benefit, Craig, of being invited by you into your community, and it is such a amazing group of people who are really rooting each other on and trying to help each other in the most major way, which is honestly rare in most cases and in the quote unquote real world. But I think it's such an amazing thing because having support and accountability is everything. Can you tell the listeners a little bit more about CLS and exactly what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I do first of all, thank you for asking, but we do so many things. I think one of the things that you're referring to is we have a CLS membership, which is a community.
Yes.
And it's we meet 3 Wednesdays a month virtually. We go nuts for an hour. Strategies, entrepreneurship, mindset, performance, branding, all that stuff. We also have a private group and chat where 500 people are networking, supporting each other, doing business with each other. And then once a month, we bring on huge guest speakers that you have access to as well. And what I take such pride in, and you acknowledge it, is it's so supportive. And a lot of the celebrities will come in and they'll be, Craig, I've been a speaker in other groups. I've never seen a community so selfless and supportive of each other. And to me, that's my greatest creation. It's not because of me, it's because of everyone in there. And because it's exclusive and it's invite only, and you met a bunch of them at the CLS Live event last month, it's just a vibe. And I encourage, as opposed to other groups, for people to support each other and help each other form those relationships and so forth. So we do that. We also have masterminds. I do some one-on-one coaching. Obviously the podcast, couple surprises coming up. There's a lot of ways to get involved, but I think the membership is a great foundation, especially if you're looking to build your network and have that tribe. Like you said, it's the cheat code that accelerated my growth was being around like-minded individuals.
Yeah. No, that's so great. You mentioned earlier, and I'm an addiction specialist and been in this field for a long time, and that's, now I do other things, but you mentioned alcohol, and just, not to make this about substance use, but just for anybody listening out there, it's some people have a hard time with that relationship changing, because it is a relationship. People that have relied on alcohol, they're, to have fun, or when they're, bored, or they're sad, whatever it is, there's that, again, that narrative around it. Just curious for our listeners, how did you approach your relationship with alcohol, and how has it changed or evolved for you?
Nobody's ever asked me that, and I'm glad that you did, because it's probably about time we start talking about that. So I don't think the opposite of depression is happiness. I think personally, the opposite of depression is purpose. And I found myself a few years back when I was really lacking purpose and meaning, drinking, like I said earlier, more than I'd like to admit, on times when I didn't really need a drink, realistically. And the reason I was doing that is because I was trying to escape my then current reality, which at the time was kind of miserable. And so by having a cocktail or a concoction, if you will, I thought that's what would make me feel better. But it really didn't. It ended up getting worse. And so eventually when I found running, and you attested to this, and I'm glad we're coming full circle, one of the many great things about running was that it creates better, enriching quality habits, right? Like if I want to continuously run and be better at it, I should probably not be drinking Monday through Thursday, right? Or whatever the case may be. And so as soon as I found some purpose in running, that was really like the gateway to the new Craig and my new life. Although CLS wasn't there yet, I was on my way. And so from that moment, when I started running, I probably drink once or twice a week on the weekends. And then CLS was born, and now I had purpose. And I didn't need a drink to get away from anything, because this is like this right now, this isn't work to me. I love being with you guys. There's nothing else in the world I'd rather be doing. So nowadays, like I'll have a cocktail on a Saturday night with my fiance, just to celebrate life. We don't even need it. But I'm not like not having it per se. Sometimes I won't, sometimes I will. But my relationship has totally changed. And I think the reason why for me is because I have nothing to escape from now. I love life. I'm very blessed. I've never been happier, more fulfilled, more excited, enthusiastic. And so now a drink is just like a compliment to a nice Saturday night. So that's what it was for me. I can't speak for everyone or anything like that, but I think the reason why I was abusing it, so to speak, was because I was looking for an escape. And now I don't want to escape. Hope that makes sense. I never really articulated that before.
Makes a ton of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same experience in my life, and I think it's a cheat code too. I think, for people who are escaping, trying to cope with things, trying to remove anxiety by having a drink, which I used to do, and then it would just compound on the other end. You'd be now hungover and way more anxious than you were before you had the drink.
Right.
So yeah, I think it is. And society's really heading in that direction. I mean, I think, younger people in general are not drinking the same way that kids were, when we were growing up, sort of.
In 20 years from now, like, how, like, if you see someone smoking a cigarette, you're probably thinking, like, why would they do that? Don't they know it's bad for them? I imagine maybe the way that society is heading in 20 years from now, people probably will have that perception about someone having a drink. Why would you do that?
For sure.
And let's just be honest. Like, drinking, although I think if you do, and you have a good relationship with it once in a while, I think it's okay. But I'm also not a doctor. Obviously, it's not great for you any way you slice it. So probably a good thing that society is heading that way.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of the times, like Jay was talking about the anxiety, I think a lot of people don't realize the impact alcohol has on your nervous system, and just your nervous system in general is an overload all the time, because we're distracting with our phones and our apps and our, and drinking and this and that. And we're just, it's an overload all the time. And so how can we, if we don't really have the tools, we're not just going to all of a sudden figure out how to decompress naturally or de-stress, or how do we unwind that in a healthy way. And And I've been reading a lot of studies recently on the nervous system and just how much alcohol impacts that, and attaches to the tissues in our bodies, and it takes days for this to get out of our system. And so I think from a biological point of view too, this has to be addressed for people that are trying to change their lives in positive ways, but yet are like, no, alcohol is not the problem. It's all these other things. It's all connected, And so I'm curious, Craig, for you too, when you're meeting all these people, we all have different stories and have different backgrounds and what's going on, why people have arrived in your community, why they want to be there. And so how do you address these for people that are kind of using substances or using a distraction or acting out in those ways? How do you kind of guide them? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so let me just be straight up, like, I'm not like a recovery coach by any means. I'll never try to be, but I would say this, like, if you're not where you'd like to be, right? A great way to change that and start to get the momentum is to look at some of your habits and your standards, right? And if you're not happy in certain places of life and you're drinking or smoking or doing things that realistically don't add value, I would say it's a good idea to start cutting those out. And at the very minimal, just by doing that, you'll now create space to do something productive, and then you can begin to cultivate momentum. So, if you're not in a good place, I don't think there is a place for those types of things at all. And by addition by subtraction, right? So you actually get further ahead if you subtract some of those things that are most likely counterproductive.
Well said.
I had such an amazing time at your last live event. Do you have a date in the calendar for the next one? Is that something you could share with us?
We're putting it together right now, brother. I'm glad you asked. And we'll be announcing it very soon. And the reason why I can't announce it right now is because literally we're putting it together as we speak. So I'll have some clap.
Okay.
By the time this show airs, you'll be able to put it in the show notes for sure.
That sounds like a plan. Excellent.
And I better see you there.
Yeah, I want to come.
I'll be there. Eric's got to fly in from LA.
Eric,
are you doing it? Are you doing it in LA?
Ooh, the plot thickens.
Oh.
Wherever it is, I'm gonna try because my goal is to get out and connect with people like you. So
then no try, just do. Consider it done. I'll put in the intention out. You'll be there.
Yes, I like that.
I will be there.
Craig, when did you mention when is the book coming out? I need a signed copy immediately.
August 2023, baby. Put that on the calendar.
Excellent.
That's
soon, man. How fast was this start to finish? How long did it? This is a pretty quick thing for you.
Wiley had a pretty aggressive deadline. So by the time...
I remember you telling me.
Yeah, I was telling you that. So I started writing. I remember I went to the library in New York City one time, and I had a great session, or so I thought. I came back, and I transferred what I wrote to my laptop and did a word count. And I was like, oh my God, that's it? I had to get 50,000 words. And I thought I wrote half the book in that session. Not even close, not even like a fraction of that. And so I was like, I better get a process here. And so December 2022, I gave myself a month. Not that I had to finish it, but they did have an aggressive deadline. I said December 1st through 31st, I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. before the rest of the world, and I'm going to write for an hour and a half. And I started to get into a groove. That turned out to be about 1,000 to 1,500 words a day. And next thing you know, the book started to write itself. And not only was I able to get to 50,000 words, but I already have half of the second book in my mind already. So I really fell in love with the process. It was so creative. It was beautiful. And when you write a book, it's like you're giving birth to something. And also, like I said earlier in the conversation, like it caused me to go back in the archives and really think about like where I came from and some of the old Greg and so forth. So I would say from real start to finish, from really buckling down, it's 1 month, which from what I understand is really fast.
Erica, you just released your 6th book? Is that correct?
6th book published, yeah. Like
wow.
Craig, I went with a traditional publisher because it's a great way to have credibility, and also was about, in my heart, what I wanted to share wasn't about money per se. I mean, although that's always, nice, but I definitely do. When you said that, it resonated. But yeah, it's my 6th book on affirmations. Actually, that's called 101 Affirmations for Addiction. Yeah, just the power again of I know it to be true for myself, that changing my thought habits and the words I use and the way I speak to myself and get myself through things is everything, and it changed my life. So that's what this book is about. But yeah,
That's awesome. Congratulations.
you said thank you, yeah, and it is. It's always a labor of love. You feel like it's and it does, and it's also something that's so, I think, very healing for yourself, because you have to reflect, you have to drop in, you have to like confront and move through, and so all of that is very, I think, cathartic and healing, and I really always enjoy it, you know.
Yeah, and
Right.
I was just gonna say affirmations. I think those are so underrated this day and age. People hear them and they think like it's a little kooky, but that's an awesome topic. I'm excited to read it myself. What were you gonna say, Jack?
I was just going to say that, you are one of my favorite human beings, and I can't spend enough time with you. And I really, really, truly mean that. And I'm so excited that you joined us today on this podcast. And as always, every time I'm with you, I ask you to tell the people something, and I'm gonna ask you to do that. Whatever comes to mind. What would you like to share?
Yeah, first of all, love getting together with you. I can never have enough of you either, brother. And it's just the beginning, which is my favorite part. Bottom line, I know that there's a lot of people out there that know deep down that they're here for much more than they're currently doing. And spoiler alert, it's true, you are. And reinvention is ready when you are. The moment that you choose to believe in a different story. And maybe all that requires is challenging your current limiting beliefs. Instead of what can go wrong, what can go right? And start leaning into that and becoming available for all that the vibrational match and all the abundance out there. But it starts with realizing that you do have a choice. You can choose a different story. You can change the plot of your movie. You can change, essentially, like we talked about, the supporting characters. And then if all else fails, look yourself in the mirror and say, why not you?
Amazing.
Amen. Amen. Craig, thank you. Thank you for coming on and being with us. And I am now a better person for meeting you, and I'm so happy to like have another human in this world that I've now know exists, and now I can look into all the wonderful things you do too. So this is a pleasure.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Best of luck with everything that you guys got going on, and just the beginning for all of us.